Hello, everyone. It's Michael Jaco with Unleashing Intuition Secrets. Joined once again by Alpha Warrior. It's been a while since we talked. He's going to talk about his FBI. They raided his home, and shortly after Trump was out of office, after J6, so lots of crazy stuff. And then just recently he basically let him go. So we're talking about that, and we're going to talk about the LA riots, and Alpha was former undercover LEO. So we'll talk about all that, and a Marine, combat action Marine. So all these things. Got a great show lined up for you guys. Hope you guys are ready to listen. Let's kick it off. Alpha, thanks for coming back on, brother.
No, absolutely, man. It's an honor. It doesn't matter how many times I get to come on with you guys. It really it just I just like the audience watching. I was an audience member at one point. Trying to figure out what was going on in the world, what was
Yeah.
going on in my country. Like, what the heck is going on? Just confused. The media's lying. Everywhere I try to turn for information on the interweb, it's disappearing. And so it brought me in front of people like you. So it's an honor to be here, brother.
Yeah, it's an honor to see you have risen in the truther community. You've done an exceptional job. So let's just go back to that point. Here you are, undercover law enforcement, and you have your own weapons and all that kind of stuff, of course. And then the FBI decides, because some post you made, free speech on Facebook, they're going to raid your house. And this was shortly after J6.
9 days after J6. And sometimes timing's divine because for those that are watching the news today, you saw Senator Padilla, who's a Democratic senator out of here in California. And he put out this long post maybe 90 minutes ago, if even that, saying, if they can do this for me, by just wanting to speak, imagine what they can do to you. So, Mike, I responded to
Yeah.
that and I said, really? Let me tell you what you guys did to me. So 9 days after January 6th, January 15th of 2021, me and my family were awakened to a loud explosion outside the home. Um, my truck alarm started going off, the house alarm started going off. And long story short on this one, it was an FBI SWAT element. So not just some people coming to talk. We're talking, zero dark 30, the sun's not out. It's a nighttime service warrant. And they got the armored Bearcat in my yard, armored vehicles behind my truck. My house is surrounded. Like I said, they flashbanged my home right outside my son's window. And there's a drone in the sky because I have a very awesome patriotic neighbor, and he captured all this on video. So we got to watch them as they deployed. We got to watch them as they threw the drone in the sky. All this for, like you said, Mike, zero criminal history, decorated Marine combat, decorated law enforcement, worked undercover, have the Medal of Valor in law enforcement.
Mhm.
Like I was very blessed with the careers that I had, and it didn't matter because I put out a tweet on January 6th regarding the things that were unfolding on January 6th. And that was enough for them to say, this guy is a domestic terrorist, and we're going to come at him the way they did. And they literally created a 4-year nightmare for me, man. That was my son's 13th birthday. He entered his teenage years with the SWAT team pointing rifles at him, turning 13 years old.
Mm. Wow. And I remember when you came on the show the first time, and you started making the rounds talking about this story. You're destitute. They ruined your life. You weren't making any money. So and a lot of you guys are watching. You gave, I gave, everybody gave to help you out. So you had a good lawyer, kept you out of prison, because these guys were like ruthless.
Yeah.
They're trying to throw, like, all the J6. I mean, thousands of J6 people went to prison and never even stood trial. So luckily we kept you out of prison. And then what happened?
I want to speak on that too. So when
Yeah.
all this happened, I've spent the last 20 years of my life on the other side of this coin. Is my military service, and then almost a decade and a half in law enforcement. So everything I know is from that side. So to be on the side where you're getting the stainless steel handcuffs going click 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 on your hands, this was all new for me outside of training.
Mm-hmm.
So prior to coming on your show, there was a couple months there because this happened, like I said, January of 2021, and I didn't hit the media wave until I want to say probably around May or June of 2021, just because my attorneys just weren't comfortable with everything that was going on at the time. They're like, it's too risky. They're still hammering other people. We don't know if they're going to bring other charges. Like there was just a lot of concern out of them. So in the meantime, I'm just getting depleted because when they arrested me, like I said, no criminal history. It was a single weapons charge. It was my old patrol rifle is what they were saying, that I didn't have, that it was an unregistered. They didn't know where it came from. Like, my agency has years and years of paperwork with it because it's what I qualify with. I have the paperwork of it. I was showing the paperwork every time I would go, on a show. But nonetheless, one single in California, listen, our judicial system isn't the best. But at that time, I was like, at least it's going to work in my benefit because it's a single felony charge that's nonviolent. Because when they arrested me, I asked them, hey, what's the bail on this going to be? I figured it'd be around 30,000, 35,000 because I've arrested people for this before. And they said $250,000. I'm like, what are the other charges? They're all, it's just this one. So I understood at that moment they did what's called a bail enhancement. And this is something we reserve for people that, like, if they get out, someone's going to die. Like, that's how dangerous they are. Like, we use that like in the most extreme cases of like domestic violence or like child abuse. Like, that's literally us pleading with the judge. If this person gets out, like, someone's going to get hurt. And so that's why a judge will allow, to exponentially grow a bail. So $250,000. So I remember we're driving to the jail, or I'm not, let me change it. I wish I was driving. I'm being transported to the jail. And prior to them transporting me, they're like, do you want to go to the Banning jail or do you want to go to the Indy jail? I'm like, I have active homicide cases at both of these facilities for like, very dangerous gang members. It doesn't make a difference which one you send me to. Like, my life's in danger regardless. So they ended up sending me to the Larry D. Smith Correctional Facility. But as we're driving there, I remember thinking, well, you know what? This is California. The jails are full, so I'm going to get Fed kicked anyway. So it doesn't even matter that they did over $1 million. I'm going to get Fed kicked. So when we get there, I tell the watch commander, the sergeant, I'm like, hey, I'm getting Fed kicked, right? And he's just like, we're getting to that. Well, I know how long this process takes from doing it, hundreds, if not thousands of times. And we passed that because I'm, prior law enforcement, they had to shut down the booking area, which for a jail, they don't like doing it because it puts them behind. And so they have it shut down. And I'm like, man, this is taking a long time. And then I see them come out with the jumpsuit, Riverside County inmate. And I remember thinking, Mike, like, they're keeping me. They're going to house me on this. And they did. And so I had to go through, getting naked, in front of, those prior coworkers. That's a violation of who you are, your dignity. Yeah. And then from there, I get thrown in solitary confinement, and I'm cooperative. Like, there's no reason to throw me in solitary confinement. And then we learned after, because remember, this is 9 days after January 6th. So nobody really knows the patterns yet. And obviously we've all learned that this was a standard protocol. You get a J6er, you throw them in the hole. Like, that's what you did. And it's cruel. I'll say this, Mike, I'd rather go back to Iraq, man, 5 times in a row than ever spend another day in the hole. It is awful. It is. It just, if, for someone who's never been arrested before, and all of a sudden you're thrown in, to this room that's 8 feet by 11 feet. And there's no humans around you. You can kind of hear some sound coming from the piping that's in the wall. And I remember because I was listening, just to hear something. And when you're isolated like that and you've never experienced it in your life, it reminds me of what you guys got trained for, as SEALs. But for the rest of us, as regular grunts and stuff, we don't get that level of training. And it was awful. And what I didn't know at the time was my family and my attorney, they had used my mom. They had got a bail bonds agent to use my mom's house as collateral. And I'm sharing this because this is important in coming into the question you asked me about. So my mom puts up her home as collateral. So my attorney calls the jail. This is all happening while I'm still being booked. I just didn't know about it. And they said, hey, we got the bail. So, just don't keep him as a keeper. We have bail. And they told him, well, you can't bail him out because he has a parole hold. Well, my attorney that I had at the time, she's worked with I've known her for years. All she does is work with law enforcement. She knows who I am. She knows I've never been arrested in my life. So she goes, what do you mean he has a parole hold? He's never even been arrested. And they're like, well, it shows a parole hold here. And she's like, well, that's a mistake. They're like, well, you can't bail him out. So, wow. And this is going to get, this is one of the things that we're going to investigate, because when I learned this all after the fact, because eventually the next day, The jail contacts my attorney and they're like, oh, it was a clerical error. That's what happened. So then they allowed the bail process to go through, and eventually I was able to get bailed out. So when I get out and they share their story with me, I reached out to a lot of my friends that work in corrections at that jail and said, hey, man, have you guys ever had this happen? They said, never, man.
Wow.
We have never had a parole clerical error on something like that. It's never happened. And
So
so
what would it take to, I guess maybe you know by now, but what did it take for them to do that, to override the whole system and keep
so
you in the hole like that?
so I asked, and all the deputies I talked to said we don't know. Like that's the software side of things, and we don't do that, you know. So that I don't know, man. I don't know.
Wow.
But what I will say
Yeah,
is,
that's crazy.
for those that don't know what a parole hold is, this is what has to happen for someone to have a parole hold, a legitimate one. A, you would have to commit a felony, you know, and then two, you would have to get caught and arrested. Then you would have to go to trial or court, and you would either, you know, fight it, go to trial and get found guilty, or you would plead guilty. You would get sentenced to prison. You go to prison, you serve a time in prison, they release you early, and then while you're out on parole, you do something that violates the parole, and then a parole officer would initiate a parole hold for you. So all
Jeez.
of that has to happen in order for a parole hold to exist. And they knew that, and they have my criminal history, so they can easily look and be like, yeah, he's never been arrested. You know, we're gonna allow him to bail out. But they didn't. And like I said, because the process was the punishment in this situation. So eventually, you know, I'll share this. There's two things here early on in this thing, Mike, that I'll have to live with forever. And the first one is, when I came out of my home, you know, all the guns are pointed at me and they're talking to me, and you know, something I'd been through 1,000 times on the other end of it.
Yeah.
And I remember the handcuffs get on me and they sit me down on the sidewalk. And that sucked. But then I had to watch my entire family come out of the house one by one. We were in the military. We have combat experience. You know, I was law enforcement as well. As with all that experience, it was still a horrible experience for me.
Yeah.
Now, imagine my family who has no experience like that, no training. They're just regular people and kids. And I could just see my family with all lights on them and the guns pointed at them. And I remember thinking, like,
Jesus. Hmm.
you can imagine how you feel as a man and as a father in
Yeah.
that situation. So that, I remember that was the first part. And then for those that don't remember, my little girl, who's now 4, at the time, she was 2 months.
Yeah.
And she was inside the house the whole time in the crib, and well, the bassinet that we had for her. And I remember my fiance was pleading with them, like, let me go get her, let me go get her. And they wouldn't. There was about 90 minutes where they were inside my house, going through my house, still hadn't showed me the warrant. And my little baby girl was in there. And I'm sitting there handcuffed, and my family across the street. And like I said, even though it's Southern California in January, it's still freezing cold at that, you know, 5:30, 5:45 in the morning.
Oh yeah.
And so then we fast forward to, you know, finally, I'm getting out of solitary confinement. My family's bailing me out, and I'm in this transport van, and it, you know, it drives you to the gate
No,
of
I want to take it back so everybody really gets this point, and we talked about it. Uh, I think they brought you in the house, or they saw that on your wall were plaques from where you were in the military and all the stuff you. They didn't even know that, and when they saw that, they came down on their intensity once they
it,
saw that. They've been told a totally different story about you.
oh, 100. There's, and this is why, you know, I can have forgiveness in my heart for the SWAT team that hit my house at that time. Because once again, this is 9 days after J6. So I'm sure even the SWAT operators, this is still all new to them. You know, they probably haven't had any reasons not to trust the case agents. You know, and for those that don't know, when I used to work detectives and undercover work, I ran large scale operations with 2, 3, 400 cops, multiple agencies, multiple
Wow.
SWAT teams, you know, hangars full of just cops from different agencies to do these large scale gang operations. So I'm very well versed on not only being on the dynamic team where we're the entry team, but also
Mhm.
have the experience of being, you know, the coordinator, the case agent for large scale operations.
Wow.
And so you learn that, you know, there's this working relationship with the guys, you know, with the guys that are going to be the door kickers. And when I give them this packet of information that has, you know, my signature, my sergeant's signature, the lieutenant's signature, the chief's signature, they have this expectation that when they receive this document, that it's honest. And it's true, because listen, when we're sending in SWAT, it's because we anticipate the door that they're going to kick in is the most dangerous of people. That's the mindset. At least that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so there's no doubt in my mind that, at 0300, when they're probably getting the final briefings before they rolled to my house, they were probably being told this guy's a domestic terrorist. He's a combat Marine. He's prior law enforcement. He has this experience. This is who we're going to go get. And this guy is dangerous. They probably thought they were going to come deal with the nut.
Yeah.
And it's probably why they did that. So the first half, the way they hit my house was they destroyed my truck. Like, we're military. I can tell you how much change is in my truck. How many pennies there are. Like it's organized, it's clean. And they destroyed the truck. And then from there, they destroyed my garage. And then the first bedroom's my son's bedroom. And like I said, this was his 13th birthday. They destroyed his room. But then to get to the part where you're asking me about, when they get to the hallway, my fiance had put up like all these plaques because it was my military stuff and my law enforcement stuff. So I had congressional awards in there. The Medal of Valor is in there. Chiefs awards are in there. Detective of the Year, Investigator of the Year. Like I said, I was very blessed with my career. Yeah. And then I had my Marine commendation, and then I had my Marine cover, and I had my law enforcement cover. So all the stuff's right there. Mm-hmm. And so my stepdaughter, her door opens right to that part of the wall. And so by this time, my family had finally gotten taken in. So there's an operator that's babysitting her. And so we learned this through her, that all the guys congregated around that section. And one of the guys had asked who we think is a team leader. She refers to him as the bald guy, and said, "Hey, are we arresting this guy?" And he's just like, "Nah, man, I think he's one of the good ones." Now, from that point on, her bedroom, my bedroom's a bedroom that has all my guns, all treated with respect. So you have one half of the house that looks like a tornado hit it. And then you have the other half of the house, which has, my firearms, where they were folding stuff, putting stuff. So what that tells me is at that moment, something clicked in those guys where they're like, someone lied to us, because my family had been respectful. I was being respectful. And so whatever they were being told was not aligning. Listen, they're not stupid. If you make it to the point where you're on a SWAT team, that means you're the best of the best.
Yeah.
And that's when those guys probably started to realize we're getting played.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So, but yeah, so to the bail part, that's where I was going with the story, is so I finally do the bail. My mom has to put her home up as collateral. Well, this is what I've learned. And so actually I'm working on some legislation, Mike. There's some things that I'm trying to change now that I've experienced what I've experienced, because I just want people to understand I still support law enforcement. I love the badge and I back the blue.
Sure.
But I hate corruption just as much as everybody else is. But I've also realized, because I was subjected to what I was doing, there are some flaws in our system that in the hands of bad cops will abuse this country and are very dangerous for this country. So there's certain things that I've been working with some people to try to put legislation through this new administration to fix those. One of those things includes our bail system. So when they gave me a $250,000 bail, I didn't have that kind of money. So my mom had to put her home up as collateral. So now the collateral we do have just got used on bail. Well, now you got to get an attorney. And well, how do you pay for an attorney? How do you pay for, a $10, $20, $30, $40,000 retainer when you can't get a loan because you already put up the one thing you have for a loan as collateral to make bail? Mm-hmm. And so right away, you're going to have Americans that are going to come in this situation where they didn't do nothing wrong, but now they can't afford a good attorney, because you got to remember, you're taking on the government. When this happened, I remember, so when I'm in that solitary cell, there's so much that went through my mind that night, Mike, but I remember thinking, if you're going to fight this, you're going to take on the most powerful government that exists in the world. And, when you take a step back and you put that in perspective, grace of God, that it worked out the way it did. And so for people that can't afford an attorney, and you're fighting the government that has a blank checkbook, you have an FBI that's being corrupt. And this is the thing that helped me a lot, was because, in California, I'm considered an expert, not just in gangs, but in search warrants. And once they started to actually do their homework on me, I think that's when they started to realize we opened Pandora's box on this guy. Like this guy is going to go away kicking and screaming. He's not going to be like everybody else. It's going to be like, yeah, give me 90 days in prison. I'll sign guilty and I'll plea on your mercy. Like, they realize, no, like, you guys, we're going to have a fight. I'm a Marine. A cop is what my career was, but my greatest accomplishment outside being a father is I'm a Marine. And you
Awesome.
guys you picked the fight with the Marine, and we're gonna see this through.
Mm.
And so during this process, they didn't want to release the search warrant at all, Mike. And so for the first 3.5 years, we had 8 pages from the search warrant, and the first 5 or 6 pages of those are all just admin stuff. It's the face page, the attachment A, attachment B. It's just it's nothing really substantial. Um, but in the few pages we had, 3 times they used confidential informant, um, uh, confidential party, and confidential informant again. So in other words, a CI is who they say referred my social media to them, which generated this whole thing of domestic extremists, anti-government, like all the hoopla that they wrote. And so in any state, but part of your constitutional right is the right to your accuser, which means you get to know who that informant is when you go to court. And so we ended up requesting an in-camera hearing, because in this time we're trying to quash the warrant. Like, my attorney at this time ended up being, he was really good, and he was writing phenomenal work. Like, me and him were, and the thing is, he was a gang cop, and then he became a gang DA prosecutor, and then he went private. So between his experience and my experience, like,
Wow.
the FBI and the state had their hands full. And he would let me go through all the paperwork before he submitted it to the court, just to make sure we were on the same
How
page.
did you find him? How did he come across you?
So, he was one of the partners for the firm that originally started representing me. And she was the one that I said knew my agency, knew me. She represents a lot of POAs.
Wow.
And then when he went private, I went with him specifically because of his experience and my experience for what we were going to cover.
Good move.
And here's the thing. This is what the audience needs to recognize. Your show, Mike, was the first show I went on where the level of financial support came in at the level that it came into. I want to say it was like in 30 days, just from this show, I want to say it was like around $22,000.
Oh my God.
That was
awesome.
raised. Like, it was, listen, my eyes were watery. My eyes were watery a lot, because there was so much on my shoulders at the time. And I remember thinking, like, well, we can sell my truck. I can borrow this money from my cousin. I can hit up these people. I was like getting ready to have like a world of IOUs. And when that came in, it was just like, we can put a down payment on the retainer right now. And just to be able to breathe a little bit in that, because then you're wondering, like, how are you going to pay rent? Because you got to remember, we're still dealing with all the COVID stuff. So it wasn't like you could just go out and find a job. And then when I would go to apply to a job, because I would get, so here's the other part. And I apologize for being all over the place. I'm trying to keep it consistent.
Oh no, this is awesome. This is really good. Thanks.
So when I would go apply,
it's building the case, because it basically, we're going to get it to the point where, Trump is about to get in office, and they're like, throw it out. So we have to build how effed up this was, and how amazing things shifted. Because I know a lot of people are saying there's nothing happening, no one's been arrested. There's a lot happening.
A lot. And I can't wait to talk about that part.
Good.
When all this, I have a phenomenal resume because of my career, between my military service, my law enforcement service, my education, and everything. I've been working since I was 17 years old. I've never not worked. And so when I would go apply to these jobs, like a lot of the high-end jobs in security, they would hire me in an instant. As a matter of fact, they would even offer me more than they were advertising, bonuses, all these great things. And finally, I was just like, you would get that. I'm sure the audience, everybody's experienced this, where there's this job you really need, and you get it, and you're like, whew, okay, we're going to be able to pay some bills. And then they would do the background check, and then the call would come in. Hey man, we're sorry, we got to rescind this offer. Hey, we got to rescind your offer. And they would never tell me why, up until there was one company, and this guy, I think, really liked me. And he goes, hey, we got to rescind this. He goes, here's the thing. He goes, based on your experience, man, we weren't the first one you came to, huh? And I go, no, man, I've actually, you're the 6th one that I've come to. He goes, I figured with your background. He goes, listen, I know this is what your skill set is. And he goes, and trust me, you deserve this job. He goes, you're overqualified for it, but you need to stop applying at these jobs. He goes, there's a government flag that's popping up in your background.
Yep.
He goes, and I had to explain the process. And he goes, here's the thing. Even when you beat this, he goes, and it's removed from your record, every company you applied to, they still have their internal records. So when you come back to apply at these companies, because now your record's clean again, it's, you know, you won, you're not even going to make it past their first initial phase because you're going to get flagged out. He goes, so I hate to tell you this, man. You either need to go work construction or start applying at fast food places, because any good place you walk to, their intra records, when you come back, you'll never have a good job. And that was, I mean, I respect him for telling me, because
Yeah.
sometimes you need to get hit with the truth. But I remember thinking, like, now what am I going to do? I can't get anything that's going to pay for my bills. Like, you're screwed. And so that's when I told my attorneys, I said, listen, I need, if they're going to screw me over, I need the world to know they're going to screw me over.
Yeah.
And I need to go and speak. And that's when they gave me the green light to start doing podcasts. And then thank God, you know, crowdfunding is what kept me and my family afloat for those 4 years. And then ultimately, you know, when I started my podcast, that helped. But just to give everybody, you know, kind of the scope of what happened during this time, I started to realize everything that the FBI did, where they were lying, fabricating evidence. And the reason I bring up that informant part I was talking about is when we finally go to court to do the in-camera hearing with the judge to reveal the identity, who this informant is, so we could figure out what's the motive. FBI tells my attorney, or the prosecuting attorney who's representing the FBI tells my attorney, hey, we don't have to do the in-camera motion. FBI reached out to me and said they made a mistake. There's no informant. They meant to write anonymous party. So, Mike, let me explain this to the audience, because again, I'm an expert in search warrants.
Yep.
If I go to the judge and on my search warrant, well, first let me tell you this. In the thousands of search warrants that I've either written or been a part of, I've used anonymous party 0 times, because chances are the judge is never going to approve it, because they understand there's too many people motives: ex-husband, ex-wife, angry neighbor, you know, disgruntled employee, disgruntled employer. There's too many people with motives for an anonymous party. And when you're talking a search warrant, you're talking about violating somebody's Fourth Amendment, their constitutional rights. And, you know, judges are going to ask you 1,000 questions you can't answer. And in the end, they're most likely going to deny it. So that's why we just don't do it. You rather just make a phone call, go visit the person, and just, you know, make it informal and safe. So when they made the lie, and here's the thing, if they would have just wrote it one time, I maybe would give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're just dumb and lazy. But if just in the 8 pages you did it 3 times, we know that this is a 100+ page warrant. How many other dozens, you know, if not 20, 30 times is it in there? And listen, I'm sorry, you don't make that mistake that many times. What this was they lied in the search warrant. Because the opposite end is when you tell a judge that your source for a search warrant is an informant, the likelihood it's going to get approved is extremely high, because a judge weighs that the opposite. If you're coming to me with an informant, we're talking safety issues. You've gone through the whole matrix of what it takes. Chances are this is an informant that's already has a working relationship with law enforcement. Like, a judge weighs heavy on that. And so they come out and they tell us that it's an error. At that second, the case should have instantly been dismissed. Instantly. And what the judge said is, well, you know, even though these mistakes are being made and all this other stuff you're saying that they've done, even though that's the case, well, because they had a California red flags law, I would have granted them the search warrant anyways. And so it didn't make sense to me or my attorney what he was talking about here. So we looked into it. And this is one of the most scariest things that I realized, which is another legislation that I've been working on. There's a loophole. So any state that has red flag laws, be warned about this. All law enforcement has to do is, let's say they want, you know, find me the man and then I'll find a crime, is essentially what they're doing here. And if they can come and just make up that an anonymous person made this kind of safety issue, then they can use red flag law. And this is and this shows us that they knew what they were doing. You know, that what we talk about intent, right?
Mm-hmm.
They went, and the day before they got the criminal search warrant in, they went before a judge for the gun violence protective order, which is the red flag law. They got that one approved first, then went in the next day with that prior search warrant, and then got the next one approved. So it was their safety net, that if the probable cause in the criminal investigation, you know, he's a domestic terrorist, if the judge doesn't buy off on that, the judge is still going to give us leeway here. It's a loophole to where you can violate pretty much any American's rights in any state that has red flag laws. It's extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And so the case keeps going on. And so then we fast forward to.
So going back to that, did was there somebody high enough up that they could lie about being, an informant? And then the judge, was a judge corrupt? Somebody's corrupt in here, and I'm sure you're gonna have to, push that issue
At
at
a
some point.
at a minimum, if the judge wasn't corrupt, the judge definitely acknowledged he wasn't doing his job. So
Wow.
in one of the cases, the judge does in chambers with my attorney. And like I said, my attorney has no reason to lie to me. One, because he would get called on the stand and he would lose his license. He goes in there and he comes out and he says, "Hey man, um, this is what the judge told me." And what the judge told him was, "Hey, I respect that your client is standing on his principles, but I'm never going to be able to give him what he wants." He goes, "If he please, we can give him a good, like, essentially like a golden goose egg offer." And so if the judge is acknowledging that what's happening is wrong, he's acknowledging that the prosecution doesn't have a case, he's obligated under his oath to do it. Doesn't He can hate my guts. He has a legal obligation at that point that not just standing on principles, but acknowledging that these things are wrong. He has to dismiss the case, and he did it. And so, like I
Dirty
said,
dirty
oh,
judges everywhere.
and
God.
this is, I left out one of the key statements he made. He tells my attorney, he goes, "There's a lot of political pressure on this." So what that tells me is either informally or formally that he recognized that my case was an extension of this big, large January 6th case going on, and that political pressure, he was never going to do the right thing because of political pressure.
Wow. Mm.
And I'm willing to bet he's not the only judge or prosecutor
Oh, of course not,
that
yeah.
that were prosecuting cases that they knew were absolutely,
Hundreds.
yeah.
Hundreds. Yeah. Wow,
And
this is man, I'm so glad you stuck it out. Jeez.
it, you know,
It's gonna expose a lot of stuff. Ugh,
it got very hard and heavy, Mike.
I bet.
It
God,
got
I can
very
imagine.
hard. You know, uh, I listen, my family supported me.
Yeah.
You guys supported me, friends. But even with all that support, like there's still a lot of times where you feel really alone, man. Like
Oh, yeah. Totally.
and I remember there's one particular time where, my fiance was she's in tears, Mike. And the reason she would let me explain how we got to this point. The DA offers me it's considered the golden egg. They said, "Listen, if you plead guilty," this was, I want to say, early to mid 2023, right around that time frame. The DA says, "If you plead guilty, you won't do any prison time. We'll drop it from a felony charge to a misdemeanor charge, and there's no restitution." I'm like, "Restitution for what?" This is just what I'm thinking because there's not even a victim, right? But no restitution. Here's the kicker: not only will we drop it to a misdemeanor, you won't even do probation. Like, we'll waive the probation, and the DA said that you can come in the next day, and the DA will sign off on your paper to expunge it from your record. So essentially, the only thing they're getting out of it is just me signing guilty, which releases them of any liabilities or lawsuits, gives them the stat, and it makes me say that I'm guilty. But no prison, no parole, nothing. It's just, in their eyes, you get some resemblance of a life back, and it's all over for you.
Hmm.
And so when I communicated that to my family, they're like, "You have to take it. Like, you have to, like," because by this time now you're seeing the people, we're, like I said, we're a couple years into this, and you're seeing the sentences that people are getting. And my family's like, "Look, at nobody's winning. Not one person's won a case." And a single weapons charge, for a rifle, it's at a minimum, it's if I remember correctly, it's 2, 3, 5. You know, and we saw what they're giving J6ers, always going on the high end. So my family's like, you're looking at 5 years. Now, me knowing the system, I'm like, no, they'll probably go middle 3, which means I'll probably serve 2 years, just over that. That's the math, because you got to prep for worst case scenario. And so they're, I remember her, like, she was mad. She was crying. She's like, "You have to take this." She's like,
Hmm.
"Who's going to raise your girls? If you're in jail, who's going to raise them? Who's going to look what's happening to the world? And if you're in prison somewhere, who's going to protect us?" And I remember she's in tears. And I remember I got in my truck. I had to go for a drive because I was emotionally just like spent, man.
Sure.
And I'm assuming she probably called my father, because my father calls me. And he starts off talking calm, but then he turns into yelling. Like, he's like, "You want to go to prison? You're going to go to prison." So I have two people that I love more than anything in the world and they're telling me you got to say guilty, and they're doing it's from a place of love. They're worried about me. They're worried about what's going to happen. They see what's unfolding,
Yeah.
and I remember having to tell them, like, listen, if I sign that I did something that I know I didn't do, you guys see me as avoiding a 5-year sentence. What you guys don't understand is I just gave myself a life sentence because I have to live with that. And I know me. I can't recover from that. I'll never be the same. Like your son and the man you love, he won't be here no more. That means every Marine that I know that I saw get hurt and die, my partner that burned alive in front of me, like everybody that died for this flag and died for this oath, like I betray them and me.
Yeah. Good.
And so when I told him I couldn't do it, I felt, man, I remember, it was heavy, bro.
I know. I went through something similar with the CIA. There was like something I exposed, and they're like, you gotta say this, and I said that, and I thought everything was good. Then they started to destroy me, and I was like, I will never back down again. And I'm glad you didn't. And I think I'm so glad other people haven't done that. And I tell everybody that don't ever back down, because if you give them an inch, they will come in and they will destroy you like they did me. So I'm
They
glad you
would.
stayed. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did.
Yeah.
Eventually, they came around and the support was there. And here's what the next major blow to me was. This was about October, November of 2024. Actually, it was October because Trump hadn't won yet. Yeah, so this was October because we didn't know about Trump taking the win yet. I show up to court. And I'm happy because there's an FBI whistleblower that was working with me, and he was giving me information like, when you go to court, you need to ask for this and this. He was telling me about programs and things
Nice.
where I would have otherwise not known of. He was pissed. He saw what I was going through, and he's like, "You got this. Listen, he's on FBI SWAT teams. We communicate on here and we communicate on there, and you need to subpoena that stuff because this is where you're gonna get the answers." So I show up to court, and I mean, my chest is out there. We're ready for the fight, and I'm ready to tell my attorney, "Hey, I got some great intel." And so when I see him, I tell him, and he's walking up to me, and the first thing that caught my attention is he's there with his partner, him and his partner. Now remember, this is a man that we've been dialed in. His experience is similar to my experience, and we've been like this the entire time. And he walks up to me, and I'm thinking, what's that guy doing here? And the first words out of his mouth, he's like, "You got to plead guilty. You're going to prison." And I'm not going to use his real name. I'll just use John. So I'm like, "John, like, what are you talking about, man? Like, we're dialed in. We got the win here. We know how that we're going to put these agents on the stand. We know what to ask them to prove all this." He's like, "Do you want to go to prison?" He's like, "If we walk through that door and you don't take a deal, you're going to prison." And I remember thinking, like, what the F is going on? Like, there
Wow.
was zero indications. But the way he was telling me, Mike, he was afraid.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened or what was said to this man, but they did something that he wasn't just telling me to plead guilty. He was pleading with me
Wow.
to be guilty. And I remember telling him, "I can't do that, man. I can't do that." And I remember him telling me, he goes, "You got to fire me. You got to fire me." And so I remember thinking, if I fire you, man, I ain't finished. Like, I'm not going to finish paying you. And if for those that have ever had attorneys, look, it's expensive. And
Yep.
when he was just like, "Fine, that's fine." I remember thinking, like, what attorney says that's fine? Like, you're talking thousands
They
of
really got to
dollars,
him.
right?
Oh my God.
And
Wow.
so then we have to do this paperwork, and then I got to formally go in there and tell the judge that I'm firing my attorney. And so I go in there, and I'm telling you, man, I was so off guard that this was one of those times where I was vulnerable, man. Like, I was always dialed in, and our military background, we're prepared for almost anything.
Yeah.
But I remember I'm literally ad-libbing everything as it's unfolding. And
Jeez.
so then, because as this is going on, I'm just like, well, there's no how to retainers are expensive. Now I got to start all over to find a new attorney
Oh,
and tell them all this stuff. And so when I go up there, then the court tells me, "Well, we can't assign you a public defender because we have to do a conflict panel because you were a cop, and most of the public defenders that we would assign to you, you've gone up against these people." So, which ended up working out because that at least bought me time. And, grace of God, Mike. And so since that bought us time, it put us after the election, which meant Trump won. And so now I remember thinking, one, there's no way I can tell an audience to help crowdfund for me again. Like, I just can't do that. Like, you guys just gave me all this money for these attorneys and all this, and now I got to tell you, hey, everybody, we got to do it all over again. Like, there's no way I was going to be able to do that. And so I said, I'll pray on it and we'll see. So I go and meet with the public defender, which, listen, I'm a cop. The worst guys, the worst attorneys are public defenders. I would never give people legal advice to go to a public defender. But I go and I meet with this guy because at the very least, it's going to buy me time. That's my game plan. This is going to buy me time so I can find ways to raise money and sell my truck. And so I go meet with them. And in that very first meeting, this guy pulls out this folder and he's like, hey, in your case, this, in your case, this. And he went through everything that because the other attorney had, my private attorney had to provide him all this stuff. He even picked up things that we missed. And I remember sitting there and I'm like, this guy's doing a really good job. And so I was just like, I don't know what his motive is. Maybe he sees this as, it's a case against the government. So you win. It's, it's definitely a career case, or whatever the case. But I was just like, let's at least go through this with this guy. There's motions and stuff I still need to do. So let's do it on the expense of the government rather than me. And then ultimately, hopefully at some point I can raise money. But he ends up introducing me to his investigator, which is a former cop. And this is a cop that had a bad experience with his agency. So, we're talking, and like, we explained the entire thing. They gave me the time, never rush. And I remember I was like, you know what? Let's take this as far. And when I'm not ready to go and get a private, then I'll do it. And it never came to that. So on January 13th, so 7 days before Trump's inauguration, we show up. I think it was a Monday or a Tuesday. We show up to court and we're supposed to announce ready for trial. Now, here's the crazy thing, Mike. And this is the first time I'm going to share this publicly. I've never shared this publicly.
Oh, awesome.
There was no, because we announced we're supposed to go to trial. That was going to be the beginning of trial, announcing ready for trial. The only person that knew what I'm about to tell you right now is me. I didn't even share it with family. There was no way in hell that I was going to go to trial pre-Trump as president. So my plan was, when we walked in that day to announce ready, I was going to fire the public defender and I was going to announce that I was going to run my case pro se. And that was going to buy me anywhere from 45 days to 90 days to prepare for trial. At a minimum, the worst thing that could have happened was that Trump was going to deny me doing pro se, which, constitutionally, you're just opening the doors for all that stuff. You can't do it. But it was also, if the judge denied me, that was going to create another appeals thing for me. So in the end, it was going to be win-win for me. So nobody knew, but I was actually going to announce going pro se. But what I was explaining to Mike and everybody is, when I walked in that morning, the attorney comes out and he's just like, hey, I think they're dropping your case. So I said, what do you mean think, man? Like, you better figure that those are big words. Like, you think and doing is the same. So he's like, let me go in there. You could tell he was just as shocked as me. So he goes in there. About 15 minutes later, he comes out and he goes, hey, man, you're going to walk through those doors. And when you come out, you're free. They're dismissing your case. And I'm just like, he goes, they're dismissing your case. And he was kind of like, I can't tell you why yet, because there's legal reasons to it, but this is where we're going. And so I go into that courtroom, and, there's, peers. These are the courtrooms where I testified as a detective. And, it was a new judge. I was not familiar with her, but I hear, state of California, on behalf of the government, the FBI, case against Alfredo Luna Jr. This case is dismissed. And it was victory. It was David and Goliath, and David won again. Now, here's I wish I could say it was all sunshine and rainbows. And a part, just so the audience knows, is back in 2023. I don't know if I said this part, but when we're going to go into the civil case for the gun violence protective order, because there was two cases, the civil and the criminal, to get the FBI to testify in the stand. Then they had dismissed that case. So I had they had dismissed the civil case a few years earlier, and then this was the remains of the criminal case. So now it's completely won. But I remember I told the attorney, make sure you tell the judge to give me a court order to get my firearms back, because I know the way this process works. And the judge acknowledged it, They gave me a court order demanding immediate release of all my property to include my firearms, ammunition, all that. So now, Joint Terrorism Task Force, FBI's JTTF, is the one that created all this drama for me. And interesting enough, Mike, the detective from Rialto Police Department here in Southern California, because it was Special Agent Enrique Armenta, he was the FBI agent, and it was Detective John Candias from Rialto PD are the two case agents on mine. So the federal and the state. Well, our Candias retires early. And that's always been very interesting to me. Because I've always made it very clear, not only am I going to win, but when I do win, I'm going to sue the government. And because both you guys lied, that means you violated policy, which means I can sue you guys individually too. Like, I've never kept it a secret that these are my intentions.
Nice.
So now I've won everything. I have the court order to get my firearms back. I go to the Rialto Police Department to get my firearms back. I go, they say, hey, you got to go to the evidence building. I go to the evidence building. I sit there and poof, here's my court order. Here's my ID. Give me back my shit. That's all. That's where I'm at. I'm on cloud 9. And so now the lady's going back and forth. She's talking to the supervisor and she comes back. She goes, we can't. I'm like, what do you mean you can't? I got a court order from a judge that says you have to. She's all, well, our policy and state policy is you got to fill out this form with the state of California to see if California wants to give you back your firearms and that you're eligible. I said, policy and mandate don't supersede law. This court order is law. And I'm telling you, you guys have to give me back my stuff. If not, your Penal Code 166 violation of court order. And I dropped the penal code on them so they would know I know what I'm talking about, because I'm sure they didn't know who I was just yet.
Yeah. So
eventually, and this poor lady, and like I said, I was respectful, but there was no secret. I'm pretty pissed.
Yeah.
Because Rialto's far, it's not like it's a neighboring city. Like, it was a long drive to go out there. And so essentially what she tells me is, she goes, listen, we can't give them back to you. You got to complete this form. And I, okay, so when people complete this form, because she says this is what happens to everybody. When people complete this form, it takes California anywhere from 6 to 18 months. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous. So while I'm talking to her, I go to the website she's telling me to complete this. And it asks for the serial numbers, all the identifying stuff for each firearm. I said, okay, well, we have an issue here. Can you print out the property page for me? Because the carbon copy you guys gave me, the property receipt, 1, is barely legible. 2, when you match it against the information that you guys put in the police report, the numbers don't match up. And you and I both know that if I fill out this form with California and there's a serial number that's off or anything, they're going to reject it. I got to start over and we're back to square one. She's like, yeah, no problem. We can give you the evidence page, but you got to go back to the main police department to records to get that. So I say, okay. So then I drive all the way there, Mike. And I say, hey, this is what happened. I need you guys to give me the police report. And she says, well, you have to fill out this form requesting the police report, and then records will call you in a few days and send it to you. So I fill out this form. You have to put, who you are, why you want it, et cetera, et cetera. I get a call a couple of days later from a record supervisor. Mr. Luna, I say, yeah, this is me. You requested a copy of the police report. In this case, it's been denied. I said, why? I need this. And she goes, well, because of the type of investigation is. I go, it's closed. I won. Your detective retired. I go, and the FBI dismissed this case. I go, and I'm trying to get my guns back, and I can't because I need the information from the police report. She goes, yeah, but the way the FBI do, and essentially what she's hinting at is because they seal these records, the FBI does. And so I told her, well, forget the police report. I'll go through the subpoena process for that, but can you at least give me the property page? She goes, we can't release you anything. It has to come through a subpoena. So I'm like, now here's the catch, and I saved this for the end. While this is going on, the same prosecuting California's district attorney's office that's been prosecuting me is now calling me back into court, not as a suspect to everyone, but to testify as an expert witness in gang cases again. So I'm showing up to court. The gang members from these prior cases see that, oh, Detective Luna's, back, not as a detective, but in the role as an expert witness from the time in my capacity as a detective. And so what do they realize? Oh, he's back. So what does that mean? I'm now a target to the gang again. I'm a target to a gang where Detective Candias and FBI Special Agent Armenta, when they did their initial police reports, they normally, everybody's here's seen a press release. They go arrest somebody. They'll be like, the 1, 2, 3 block of so-and-so. They never give specific addresses. And it's for a reason. It's a safety issue. Well, the FBI doxed me to the media. They put my specific address. They put my driver's license number in the newspaper, and in there they wrote, and the FBI took all his firearms. So you just told every gang member that has open cases with me where I live and that I don't have any means to protect myself or my family. And for 4 years, I had to live that nightmare. My son wasn't allowed to throw the trash. Nobody was allowed to check the mail because if something was going to happen, I wanted it to happen to me, not to my family because of me.
Jesus. Wow.
And so yeah, so during this process, they don't want to return the firearm. So of course I had to go, and now I'm bringing this to present day. So a few weeks ago, back in April, in April or late March, I go to buy. So I'm like, I got to be able to protect myself. So I go buy a new rifle and a new pistol. And California, you have a 10-day rule and all that, and then you get your guns. So I'll use the company because shout out because they did it right. So Turner's, shout out to Turner's. I know sometimes they don't get a lot of love, but I'm going to give Turner's love. So I got to the local Turner's to buy a rifle and a pistol, and I get a call a couple days later, and they know the whole story because I've shared everything with them, and they said, "Hey man, your background check came back as delayed." He goes, "So it's going to take a little longer than 10 days." He goes, "So run the process through me." He says, "All right." He goes, "They got 30 days now to do your background." He goes, "And there's one of three things that can happen. Your background can come back approved, it can come back denied, or it can come back inconclusive." I'm like, okay, well, it's not going to come back denied because, like I said, my record's clean. I have no restraining orders. There's nothing prohibiting me from owning a firearm. I go, what's inconclusive? He goes, well, it's the same as no. He goes, let me explain. He goes, inconclusive means that the state's not clearing you, but they're also not saying you can't own a gun. So they leave the onus on the dealer, but no dealer wants liability. So every dealer, now that the ball's in their court, will deny the transaction. So you end up having to, you have to find some mom and pop shop that willing to sign you. So it ended up taking about 3 weeks. He calls me and he's like, "Hey, your background got approved. You can come in, finish paying off the balance, and you get to take these bad boys home with you." Wow. So I go and I do. So now when I'm going through Rialto, when I was trying to get my firearms back, they said that the reason the state does this process is because they have to confirm that you can have firearms. So now I call Rialto back. I'm saying, "Hey, I need my guns back. I have that court order." And, "Wait, sir, you got to do that form." I said, "Yeah, but you told me that form is because the state has to make sure that I can own firearms. I have a background clearance because I just bought a rifle and a pistol. So now you don't have that concern because I can bring this form to you that shows you my background's approved. You can run these serial numbers to see, where they came from and that I own them. And now we're good." Nope, doesn't work that way. So they still have my original firearms hostage. I have the new firearms and ammunition, and trust me, man, trying to build a supply and ammo again in California with the cost of it's been very expensive, and that kind of brings us into present day where I'm at now, man.
Yeah, that's good. So you probably got, I would say, a release because the political situation changed. Because this political situation was keeping pressure on you. That's why they did this to begin with. The judge was even admitted, it's a political situation. I can't if I want to, and it's lawful, I can't release you. So then the political system changed. That pressure came off, and you got released. So that's and that happened for a lot of the J6ers too.
They did.
So and I worked with several of them.
One of the things that I left out, just so people know, is during this process, this was back in, I want to say June or July of 2021. I get 3 letters from Bank of America that says you have 21 days to remove your balance. We're closing down your account. You can't appeal it. Wouldn't tell me why. And ultimately, we learned that they started doing this to all the J6ers. So I get debanked from Bank of America. I was still doing contract work for explosive work with K9. So, we fly all over the country. And so I immediately noticed that when I started to fly, I'm getting pulled for all these checks, which ultimately we learned that the Quad S program. So for the last 4 years, every time, because now I speak at conferences and stuff like that, every time I fly anywhere, always pulled aside for the quote unquote random, right? This random inspection, because we learned that I'm a Quad S'er. But the good news is last month, we're in June, so April, I went to fly out to Plymouth, Plymouth, Massachusetts. And, I showed up early because I'm like, here we go, Quad S, and it was gone. I was a normal person again. So now I was just like, I was like, well, now because listen, if you're Quad S, you got to show up like 3.5 hours early for the process so you don't miss your flight. So now I'm sitting there and I'm just like, what do I do with all this time? Because I got to experience it, but I was so traumatized from all this, Mike, that on the flight home, I was like, well, maybe they just missed something on the flight over here, and I still better show up 3 hours early because if it was a mistake and I think I'm normal again, and I go, I'm gonna miss my flight, I'm screwed. If I live on the West Coast, I'll be on the East Coast. So I still showed up early, but no, it was normal. So it's official. I'm off the list that they say never existed. I'm now off of it.
Wow. But there's still obviously some problems in California, as we're seeing now with the LA riots. So where do you see that going? I know you're a good distance away from it, where you live, but and you noticed a few things, but nothing major. What do you think is going to happen?
So, and this opens up that conversation we talked about at the beginning of the show too. A lot of people say nothing's happening. Absolutely, there's a lot happening. Here's one of the first things that I want to bring to everybody's attention. This is the first administration, because even Trump's first administration, they didn't pull this off. Who can tell me a leak they've heard in this current administration? There's been 0 leaks.
Good point.
Even in Trump's first administration, it was notorious. There was leaks everywhere. And people even said, like, what the heck's going on? We've had 0 leaks in Trump's presidency so far. We're approaching 6 months. There hasn't been 1 leak. What does that tell me? Operational security. Now, to supplement this thought process, 2 weeks ago, you have Cash Patel and Dan Bongino come out and say it's no longer safe for us to be in the Washington headquarters. We're moving shop. Let me translate that for everybody. The place is covered in surveillance. We know they're monitoring what we're doing, and we can't be there no more. So we're moving to another facility. What this tells me is the phase that they're moving into now is a phase that they don't want the deep state eavesdropping on. What else supports this opinion that I have is, what else did they say the following day? Our reinforcement teams, or I think he said reinforcement or reform teams, I forget which word he used, should be ready to be in every field office within the next 2 weeks, which I would believe that's this week now. What that tells me is they just sent teams to every field office in the country that are going to do 2 things. They're going to make sure those offices are working the way they're supposed to, and they're going to make sure that there's nothing corrupt going in there. So you have them closing down the office that everything's being surveilled in, and now they're sending watchdogs to every field office to make sure they're not compromised. That tells me they're moving into a phase that is probably putting us a lot closer to what we all want to see, which is these arrests. And
wow,
so
that's great. Man, this is so good to have your insight on this. Wow, fantastic, man. Good job.
Well, and so here's the other part. Here's the other part that's really important that people have to understand is, and I think the one thing we all understand is, these are RICO style. These are either RICO investigations or a hybrid of a RICO style investigation. So we all want arrests, but I would ask the audience, what's more important to you, an arrest or a conviction?
Yes.
And hands down, we're all going to say convictions. We still know that the DOJ still has people that are dirty in it. The FBI still has people that's dirty in it. And we've seen through the pushback against Trump that we still have a compromised judicial system. So 2 things to consider in this food for thought here. If the arrests were to happen now, you would be putting these cases in front of corrupt judges. Mm-hmm. You would be putting them still in front of corrupt people that can compromise these cases. They can create situations of prosecutorial misconduct to get these things dismissed. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is, if these, and I believe I'm 100% right on this, Mike, if these are RICO style investigations, that means there's all kinds of wiretaps that are taking place right now. There's all kinds of, we're finally probably using FISA in the appropriate way. And once you make that first arrest, we all have a constitutional right to a fair and a speedy trial, which means even though we're used to seeing cases being drug out, it would be tactical for that first case to be like, nope, we're ready to go to trial now. And people would ask, well, why is that to their advantage? Well, it's not to that person's advantage, but if that person's threatened where they don't have a choice, they're going to be the sacrificial lamb. It's an advantage to everybody else, because that means that the prosecution now has to release all the discovery. So if you still have active wiretaps, if you still have active surveillance, you just compromised every one of those cases. So the first arrest that we want, that can't be made. It can't come to the public until they're ready to close shop on the entire investigation. So this way, if in the event it becomes an issue of discovery, nothing's compromised. So what I anticipate is that when we see that first arrest, you're going to see a snowball acceleration of arrest, 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 arrest.
That's what
Now,
I thought.
so when people ask, well, when do you think that's going to happen? Here's two things that I'll say. Me personally, I think we see it right before midterms or just after midterms.
I agree. After
That's the one I'm
midterms.
looking at. One of the markers that I'm looking for preceding that is when we start to see judges and prosecutors arrested, removed, or defunded. Because that means when they start to move that element out, that means they're getting ready to put the stuff we want into the judicial process.
Absolutely.
So I would say the marker to look for is when we start seeing judges defunded, because there's a lot that you can't fire them and you can't remove them, but you can definitely defund what's coming into them. So defunded, we see judges are starting to get arrested with some of these other things. And I actually think that that's a test, Mike. I think they want to see how's mainstream media going to handle the optics of this? How's the deep state going to handle the optics of this? How's the normal everyday citizen going to handle the optics of judges being arrested? And guess what? We all are good with it because we're like, we don't want them defending illegals. So you're seeding a mindset of it's not shock and awe to see judges arrested. And so now in the future, when we see them get arrested for these other things, you're not going to have like a lot of pushback. You're not going to lose the court of public opinion, and you're going to be able to facilitate that process. And that's how I would see that pan out.
Yeah. Like that Wisconsin judge, that's just the opening salvo, I think. I think you're right. So yeah, the corrupt judicial has to be taken out before we can really move. I agree.
Yeah. And so to bring it back to your question with LA is, listen, there's a lot, for those that are unfamiliar with Operation Gladio, I would say absolutely study that. You should actually have Colonel Towner on your show, Mike. She is the absolute authority on talking about that. She's phenomenal in her explanation of this. But what you learn is, we hear about all these intelligence agencies, we hear about these terrorist networks, but we have this understanding. We use the word deep state, and right. It's kind of the umbrella of what all these organizations, and these bad groups fall into. And when you look at the LA riots, and you just saw Bongino and them and Cash announce the guy that was passing out the masks just got arrested.
Yeah.
And if you look into that guy, he's part of a group known as the Brown Berets. And when you research the Brown Berets, there's a history of corrupt activism that follows them. There's a lot of organizations, like La Raza and things like that. But this particular unit, they're pushing it's bad stuff. There's a lot of photographs with them with some of the BLM leaders, which is that's usually you wouldn't expect that. You have a very cultural Mexican thing with a very cultural Black thing. They're usually going to be at odds ends with each other, but you see these leaderships in these units that are, taking photo optics together. So there's a collaboration there. We see what's happening with the lady from Walmart, the Walton lady, financing the No Kings. Everybody's kind of seen the map out there. So what you can see when you look at what's going down in LA and with the mask and the Brown Beret guy being the one distributing them is there is a professional orchestrated effort behind that. This is not a grassroots organic, protest turn riot. No, this is something that was planned. It's systematic. We've seen the leaflets and stuff that have instructions in English and in Spanish on what to do, how to create chaos, how to avoid law enforcement. They were dumped all over LA. People have been putting them all over social media. Well, you have DOJ and FBI, going after these Brown Beret guys, doing these arrests. That means they're going after the intel. If you look at the deployment of the Marines, here's one thing that caught my eye, Mike, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. Yeah. The Marines are going to go in. That means their ROEs are going to be to defend the federal buildings.
Yep.
And a very limited scope on how far out that perimeter is. It's going to be very, very limited. So then ask me this, Mike. LAPD has its own helicopters. FBI has its own helicopters. Why are we seeing Marine Blackhawks and Marine Cobras way outside the scope of the perimeters doing recon?
Yeah, because as you and I know, Marines are fantastic as far as closing with and destroying the enemy. And they don't rely on anybody else. They're completely self-contained. And if they're told to go, oh buddy. So I think it's a strong message to deep state actors that we're ready to go, full in on this. So
100%.
And they probably had some insight that something was going to go down.
100%. As soon as I saw those helicopters breaking what would be the normal perimeter, I said they're preparing for these Marines to go outside the scope. They're not just going to be there babysitting a building. They're prepared for these Marines to have QRF teams to go out there, help the HSI guys. They're reconning how this all looks, and they're preparing for that. So that gave me a lot of joy knowing that they're going to lay the smack down as soon as they get the green light. So I was happy about that. The other thing that it allowed me to recognize is Governor Newsom didn't put the request for the National Guard. And so you've seen this argument being made of, well, hold on, how can Trump deploy the National Guard? He's not doing what precedence has set. And this is what I'll explain to the audience. Let's rewind just a couple of weeks, Mike. We have the largest U.S. military presence at the southern border of the United States in the history of our country. My question is why? You have Tom Holman, President Trump, coming out saying that our border is secured 93.7%. They've literally have almost shut down fentanyl coming to this country, and they've literally almost shut down immigration or invasion coming to this country. It's not like the military is only deployed to the part where they still need to build the wall. It's a mass deployment across our southern border. So if there's not an immigration crisis and there's not a narcotics crisis, why do we have the largest U.S. military presence? Because they understand that there's a threat.
Yeah.
And they have this military pre-positioned for a threat. And Trump understands this. And so what I kind of been telling, my audience over the last few weeks as we've kind of been watching this and looking at the different types of units being sent to the southern border is I said, listen, we've always had, Juanito's done a good job of explaining it to us as others that there's certain cities that we know are going to get attacked. We know LA's, one of those cities that's on the radar. Every major city, Portland, the Seattles, the Dallases, the Austins, New York. We've kind of know these cities to expect. Well, if we know, and if you go back to 2023, you have the United States Police Chiefs and Sheriffs Association and this is back in early 2023 when they said that somewhere between 12 and 18 million illegals had came into this country. But the concern was that at that point, 2 million of them were considered tier 1 threats. So if you got, and just to put this people into perspective for people to understand, if you guys all remember looking at the deployment of the U.S. military in Iraq during the war, the largest military presence we ever had in Iraq at one time, U.S. presence, was 360,000 troops. And if you guys remember looking at the map, you could see us everywhere.
Yeah.
Now imagine 2 million tier 1 threats in the United States. That's a deployment. That was a strategic military deployment inside this country with military-age males from every adversary that hates us. And the worst part of it is, it wasn't just Mexicans. It wasn't just blacks and Haitians. You had Europeans that were sent over here. You had Asians that were sent over here. You had military-age males that look like the demographics that represent all of America. And so if we think about what did they do on January 6th, we know January 6th was something that was orchestrated by the intelligence agencies, color revolutionaries, contractors, the FBI, et cetera, et cetera. And once you get enough of them to participate, you have the emotions of the crowd that was there that gets involved. So you have this thing that started off synthetically that all of a sudden looks organic because everybody's emotions gets involved. So if we understand, and we know that, the Gretchen Whitmire case, that was kind of setting up for J6. Well, J6 was also setting us up for something. Aside from making everybody afraid to go to protest, it was also to gauge and understand how would this look on a mass deployment. So now imagine in LA, we'll use as the test, as the beta one for this. If you have people that are out there that look like the people of LA, well, how many of those do we know were actually American citizens? How do we not know a lot of those weren't some of those 2 million tier 1 threats that were specifically sent to California because they match the demographics of California? And then you start sucking in, because here's something I found very interesting, Mike. Over the last 2-3 days, a lot of the most popular LA gangs were putting out videos saying, you better not bring that to our hood, or if you do, it's lights out for you. So there were a lot of LA gangs that were back protecting their hood and not involved in the riots.
Good point.
Yeah. But when you look at the riots, you're like, but I saw a lot of gang members. Did you?
Or what looked like them, yeah.
Or did you see what looked like gang members? And so I think what we saw unfolding in LA was chess. Trump the deep state, because this is what gangs would do to us. every now and then, and everything that I'm just so people understand, my mindset and thought process here comes from what I saw at the local level with the way gangs played the chess match with us as, the gang teams and the detective teams. And I just see this as a much larger scale, and then obviously our military backgrounds.
Yeah.
So one of the things gangs would do is they would go and do fake robberies with zero intentions to actually rob the store. But they would have surveillance cars because they wanted to see what was our response time based on, how many robbers were, the 911 caller gave in, how many units did we dispatch? They were reconning us.
Yep.
They were doing counter intel. And I think what you see here happening in LA is you're seeing intel, counter intel, and then counter intel, because you have the deep state
Yep.
that wants to say, okay, what's it going to take for Trump to deploy the military? And if he does deploy the military, in what capacity is he going to do it? If we handcuff to where we don't give Trump a working relationship with the military, how's Trump going to handle that? And so I think you see both sides. Trump's not going to show all his cards. Newsom and the deep state aren't going to show all their cards, but both sides are making this assessment because what's coming over the next few days, these mass riots. So
Right.
you deploy LA first. It's one of the biggest ones because what are they doing now? Both sides are going back to the drawing board. Okay, he did this and she did that. So let's make these adjustments for all these riots that are coming over the next few days. And I think what we saw in LA was a beta test for
Yep.
what the No Kings movement's going to try to deploy.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And I wonder if we have the resources available to respond to all of them, because there's supposed to be like upwards of 2,000 different protests. Of course, not all of them are going to be violent, and some of them will be distractions, and some of them that we think we're going to be in violent. Some we think we're going to be in violent are not going to be, and maybe they pose as being violent, and then they just like peter out real quick once they get a response. So again, testing, but I really think that we're going to see people getting killed soon. I don't know what soon is. Is it going to be in a couple of days? Is it going to be in a few weeks, another month or so? But once the killing starts, it's going to ramp up pretty significantly.
I agree. And this is why I tell everybody, trust your discernment. And just because you see something unfolding on TV, because like I said, if you go back and you look at the LA riots over the last few days, all of us are like, yep, that's what happens. They go out there, this is what it looks like. It looked like what we anticipate. But that's why I challenge people to think, is it really what we saw? Or was there an orchestration that took place here? Because here's the other thing to consider, you know, just like, for those that follow the boards, in the boards, it talks about how you got to be prepared for contingencies. And that's just something you have to do in real life tactically anyways. Well, the deep state didn't think Trump was going to pull off the win in 2024. They were able to steal it from him in 2020. So they have this mindset and this plan of what 2024 was going to look like. And I think that's what the invasion was for. I think we were going to see mass chaos and casualties. When they saw that Trump won, now they got to go to the contingency. So I think we're still going to see it. We're not going to see it on the scale that they initially planned for. But I think what they're going to try to do, I think what their contingency is, and you could look at the rhetoric that Mayor Bass put out and Governor Newsom put out, is they were using words like, Trump's violating the Constitution. That it's the White House that's creating this chaos. All of us know when all this is said and done, there's going to be some oversight committee that's going to come back and look at Trump's administration and to, like they did J6 and everything else. Now, here's the thing though. Trump's team's prepared for it too, because all you have to do is go through social media. Look what Ezra Cohen has said. Look what Dan Scavino has said. Look at what Kash Patel has said. Look what Stephen Miller said. And they've all been using words like this: enemy combatant, LA's occupied, there's an invasion. They're all speaking the language to support Trump doing a military operation. And we know that through these prior oversight committees that they've always used social media to go back and say, well, Trump said this and your people said this. So Trump's people are all on the same page on the verbiage that they're using. And words matter in an information war. So I think what the deep state's going to do now is try to use this as an impeachment process against President Trump. And I think this is what we're probably going to see in the future is there's only three ways they get rid of Trump. They let him finish his term, which they don't want to do. They try to do what they've already tried twice and been unsuccessful in, or impeach him. And we see what's going on in the Middle East. They're trying to sabotage what's going on in the Middle East. We've seen that they try to sabotage what he's been doing with the economy, with the tariffs. So I think they're going to bring all this stuff into an apex, Mike, and they're going to try to use that to kind of create this, look at all this is because of Trump. We have world problems. We're having economic problems. We're now having, chaos in the streets. They're hinting at COVID 2.0, everybody. That's we're not completely clear of that. And I think they want to put all this at the foot of Trump to do something that's an impeachment. But I think based on watching Trump over the last few months in his presidency, that he's multiple steps ahead of him, because everything they've tried, it's backfired on them.
Yeah. So I mean, we've had Sean Taylor on. We're trying to get him on to do a roundtable here so that he could get his insights as far as like the money situation. The cartels basically running a lot of this stuff, and that's what Tom Homan and his team were really going after in LA. Do you see them giving pieces to the Democrat Party, and that's why they're so vehemently trying to oppose Trump going after the illegal aliens?
So I had a chance to interview JJ Carroll 2 days ago.
Okay. Nice.
And and he's got a vast amount of networking with the Border Patrol guys and stuff like that.
Sweet.
And he doesn't he doesn't have as much light and hope as I do. He's definitely he's in a darker place than I am. But nonetheless, using his information, he's not happy with, if you're going into LA and at a minimum a third of the population is illegal, why are you going in with such small numbers and not giving these guys, go in there with, get your best of the best in Border Patrol, and instead of doing individual operations, nationwide, tackle these big cities with all these guys. And he doesn't necessarily, he loves Tom Homan, but he says that there's a gap in the leadership between the guys in the the rank and file guys, and when you get to Tom Homan, and that this lack of experience is kind of what's facilitating this good intentions, but you're not doing it the correct way. So there's, in full transparency, I trust his opinion. That's what he did for a career. He knows these guys far better than I do. But the next question I asked him, Mike, I said, well, now, given what happened, are they going to back off? Is Tom Homan going to pull the reins on the guys and say, hey, let's let these fires simmer out a little bit before we go? And he said he absolutely can't. Now he can't. They have to even continue to go harder. He goes, so this is going to escalate. I said, okay. So then I'd rather use his words.
See, military go across the border. What are your thoughts?
Man, there's no coming back once we do that one.
Yeah.
But if you look at what the Mexican president said, she initiated it. You start telling people in our country to mobilize, those are strong words. You get the, I forget what his position is in the cabinet, that came out and showed the sign, or the map. And he's like, yeah, we'll pay for this.
Oh yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Listen,
this is our land. We want it back. Yeah.
I don't know how you took it, Mike, but I was like, that sounds like a threat. Like, it sounds like you're
come get it. Yeah, come get it. We backed off in the Mexican-American War. We basically came to your capital and we're like, okay, we're just going to take this area and you guys can have the rest of it. So, I don't want to take any of Mexico. I love Mexico, but I think the borderlands are basically are going to have to be taken.
We have to.
Yeah,
we have to. Yeah. We've shown enough, because listen. It's easier to defend our border if it's been moved down a little bit than it is the way it currently exists. Right. If you just look at the way the land looks itself, it'd be easier. And we'll see. But our military is there for a reason, Mike, and it's not to keep people in, because there's a lot of special units that are tapped into that already.
Right.
So we know the CCP is working with the cartels. And we know Mossad's working with the cartels. We know Mossad's giving the cartels a lot of tech and a lot of weapons. We know the CCP is giving the cartels a lot of the financial influence through the fentanyl and stuff like that. So, the cartels is not the way people used to see back in the movies. A bunch of guys on some rinky-dink trucks, hanging out the windows with AK. The cartels, if you guys haven't been paying attention, they got the same type of equipment that our SWAT teams have.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say in a lot of situations,
RPGs and all kind of crazy stuff now. 50 cows, yeah, they got it. They got it all. A lot of it came from Afghanistan through Ukraine. Yep.
So I started the show saying that I support law enforcement, and I do. And so if people have respected my opinion up to now, then hope people will respect this. Our law enforcement is not trained or designed to fight the cartels.
No.
And they're not trained or fight or to fight military units within our country. They're not. Even if you have guys with military experience like I was on these teams, because you do have that, they don't represent the vast majority of the agency. Mm-mm. And gangs don't move and operate like military units. They don't, most cops aren't going to understand that they're being flanked. They're not going to recognize a military ambush. Everybody thinks in the concept of mafias and street gangs. And I'm telling you, from fighting both of them, they don't operate the same. They're completely different strategies. And so if you're fighting a cartel or a unit, a terrorist unit that's came into, Houthis one, a Hamas one, you name it, Al Qaeda one, what are they going to do before they take down any cop? They're going to take down the communications for that agency.
Right.
They know where our repeater towers are. They know what the antenna structures on these agencies look like. They're going to take them down. They know that we rely on air support. You don't think they're going to go and take down the helos? You don't think that they know which fixed wings we have at private airports? They know all this information. They're going to take out the logistics for law enforcement. Then they start taking out the officers. And when you have officers responding to that, they're going to be responding to ambushes. And the reason I know this is about a decade ago in Southern California, the closest we ever saw to a military style attack was when the Mongols took on the sheriff's department and police department in Hemet. And they did it with ambushes. And you want to talk about scaring the shit out of law enforcement? That scared the shit out of law enforcement, because everybody looked back and said, man, that could have taken out any one of us. And the response to that was a failure. Because as I was looking at it, I was like, okay, we've put out safety bulletins. We've brought awareness to it. Why are we not training to actively engage this? Why are we looking at this as a one-off situation? And that if there was a moment to prepare for it, that was it, Mike, and we never did. And so, people have to understand that our military is the only way to combat the cartels or any unit that's inside our country. That's the only way. Yeah. Now, our law enforcement can supplement it, but our law enforcement can't lead that. They would get taken out, man. They'd get annihilated.
Mm-hmm. Now, I saw this earlier, and I just looked it up while you were talking, because I wanted to make your case that you were talking about come true, as far as like they're going to go after the police. They already started to go after police. In New York Police Department, they had a bunch of cars. They got firebombed. Incendiary devices. They found incendiary devices that hadn't gone off, but they destroyed a bunch of their cars. So it's already started, like you're talking about, in New York, and it's not getting the press. A lot of these attacks right now aren't getting the press, and that's by design too. It's really going to be up to people like us to keep people informed. And at some point, I think we may even go down as far as like the internet, the grid system. I've already started to see a little bit.
It was a scare today.
Yeah.
For those of us that use StreamYard today, I use StreamYard. It completely went down globally.
Oh, it was globally? I thought I thought they were just going after me.
No, it went down. It went down globally, and come to find out, it was as a result of the Google Cloud service. And so, we saw vulnerability. Now here's a good contingency. Shout out to Chris Polovosky over there at Rumble, because he immediately took to social media and said, Rumble and Rumble Studio still working. So yeah. I responded to him, and I was just like, all right, brother, you got it. I just wish you made it more pretty, because StreamYard's so much easier than the Rumble Studio.
Yeah, definitely. All right, brother. Any other things you want to talk about, or let's promote your Alpha Warrior show over on Rumble.
Yeah, what I would tell everybody is, I know we're frustrated
Yep.
because we're not seeing the arrests in the timeline that we want, and I
Right.
understand that. But I would tell people is, these are some of the mistakes that I've been hearing, and I understand because they're honest mistakes. Well, they've had these cases for years. Why not just go arrest them? The investigations have been done. They haven't. Cover up investigations have been done. The destruction of evidence has been done. The burying, every investigation we saw was a compromised one. So what you're seeing now is, not only do they got to go back and reinvestigate these cases the correct way, but in the course of that, as you learn about the cover-ups, those are new investigations that you have to investigate. And we're talking child crimes on a lot of these things, the most hideous of crimes that are out there. And I can tell you from a detective, and thank God I had very few, because I dodged them as much as I could, because it's just not, that's not what I wanted for my career. I wanted the violence and gangs is where I wanted to be. So my hats off to my partners and detectives that did child crimes. The little bit I did, Mike, was just, it's nightmares, bro. But they take so long. Like people think, like, when you see an active abuse case, like someone just got, a child just got assaulted, they're arrested right away, it goes to court right away. Those typically they're fast because it's something that just happened. But when you have a case where a kid comes back and it's like, hey, my uncle or my neighbor did this to me, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, those cases are so lengthy because there's so much that you have to try to prove because so much time has passed.
Oh,
That was just one case. Imagine 100,000, 200,000, and you're limited in the people that you have. So one, I'm thinking that the first thing they did is probably triage. Which cases even have a fighting chance if we even bring them to court? And then on top of that, which cases still have kids, or where the victims are still minors, because they may have happened until when they're 6, 7, and 8. Maybe they're 17, 16 now. They're still minor. There's still legal things that you have to do to go through that. That takes time. So I would just tell people, be patient. And with that, everybody I always ask me, well, then how long, Alpha? What is your timeline that you're giving these people? It pretty lines up with every timeline that I've said. It's midterms. And this is why. If we get to midterms and we haven't seen anything, then you're probably going to see me start ringing the bell, the panic button, because at a minimum, you need 2 years allotted for the court time. So we need a rest by the time we get to midterm to make sure we see these come to their conclusion by the time Trump's coming out in 2028.
wow.
And so for me, the red line in the sand is absolutely midterms. If we're going about this through the state and local jurisdiction. Now, if this moves into something like military tribunals, that's outside the kind of the scope of my expertise, and I don't really know what that window looks like, but it is realistic. But as I understand it from some of the people that I've reached out to that do have that experience, that's actually faster than the state cases. So I would say that would move the timeline forward, not farther back. So I would just tell everybody, just to remind everybody, look for judges and prosecutors and attorneys either retiring, quitting, or getting debanked. And then shortly after that, I think we see the arrest coming, and this will come. So let's just be patient a little bit more and allow these guys to do it the right way. And I think a testament that they're doing the right way, again, Mike, is we have not seen one leak from this administration. Their operational security is tapped in.
That's a really good point. I noticed it, but I didn't put it together like you did. That's fantastic. And all the things you put together for us today, excellent job as usual. So Alpha, thanks so much for coming on. It's a pleasure and honor. Wow, you've gone through so much and you've come out, smelling like roses. So good job.
Thanks to you, Mike, to the missus, the family, to the audience here. I'm here because you guys just didn't support me with words. You reached into your pockets, and I understand how hard it is to give money out when we're all scared about what's going to happen to our money to begin with. And so I just want to say I'm really indebted to you and your audience, and I'm very grateful for all the support I had from you guys.
Yeah, you didn't let us down.
I was
we
never
believed in you, man, and you lived up to it. So God, did you ever? Unbelievable. Good job.
Listen, I was never signing guilty, man. That was not going to happen.
Fantastic. Yeah. Brilliant. All right, brother. Thanks so much. And thanks for everybody that watched and you're going to watch. Share this widely. This is really good insights and intel. We'll see you guys next time.
God bless.
God bless.